So last stop here, Tsolum Prairies. This is immediately upstream of Pentlatch. We don't even really need to walk. If we want to, we can get in our canoe and maybe pole it because it's pretty shallow there on the Tsolum. Tsolum is a Pentlatch word. It's a Pentlatch place name. In my understanding, it means to honor with a celebration or something like that, indicating that that river is a important thing worth celebrating. Now, these prairies were important. Right now, it's all open cattle field, basically, with fringing trees. But these were open prairies and meadows when the first settlers got here. This isn't like colonial land clearance. This is Indigenous land clearance. And we can be quite certain of this, well, because we know it was wide open when the colonists first got here. They were very excited by this, right? There's not a lot of open arable land on Vancouver Island, but there were 3,000 to 5,000 acres of this Camas prairie here back in the day. It's dominated by this garry oak, right? This is garry oak ecosystem, which is my understanding is the richest biological ecosystem in British Columbia. And from the perspective of Indigenous folks, what's most important here is this Camas that loves garry oak, right? It absolutely loves garry oak. So each of these little blue bulbs is a Camas plant. It just finished flowering. You might see some around the Comox Valley, but it finished like a week or two ago. And it clearly grows in profusion in this sort of environment. People were harvesting this stuff in huge quantities. To cook Camas, I think you have to cook it for 2 days in an underground oven. And when we find Camas roasting pits archaeologically, sometimes they're really huge, like 8 meters across. So people aren't cooking a few Camas bulbs. They're not cooking like 100 Camas bulbs. They're cooking like 1,000 kilos of Camas bulbs at a time. So everybody's getting together, right? You cook a huge quantity of this stuff. This is also really important because this is essentially the northernmost distribution of Camas, right? If you go down the island, it gets a bit more abundant, and then Oregon, it's actually super abundant, but it really doesn't occur north of here. So Pentlatch people used to trade this stuff to the north, for ooligan oil or other specialty products that we don't get down here and send up there. And some of the oral histories that we have that record events going back into pre-contact times, when they describe marriages between Pentlatch women moving up to Alert Bay, that seems to where they always go, they bring Camas with them as a dowry, like 20 boxes of this stuff sometimes. And then when they have the big feast up there, everybody agrees that it's really good. So there's this incentive to marry into families down here, and we see this going back way into pre-contact times. Pentlatch women marrying into the highest ranking families in Alert Bay, and part of that, in my mind, is to solidify access to all these resources, right? You make new family, you establish those connections, and you can come back and forth. So this would have been a really, really rich environment. Really, it's an anthropogenic garden, right? People would have seasonally been burning this to keep it open. Otherwise, it would have totally encroached hundreds of years ago. We know this to be the case because basically since the colonists have arrived and then started establishing these fire suppression colonies, the Camas fields are starting to disappear, right? You see this on Hornby Island, you see this in Victoria, you see this everywhere. The Doug fir just encroaches and encroaches and encroaches, and then the garry oak gets choked out and the Camas get choked out, it all disappears. So this has been an open meadowland for at least 3,000 years, probably 8,000 years when these oak trees were much more common. We've got archaeological features going back to 1000 BC in these Camas fields in the Comox Valley, where we know they're roasting Camas because we find copious amounts of firecraft rock, these giant earth ovens, and actually charred Camas roots within them as well too. And occasionally these as well, bracken fern root. So apparently bracken fern root is moderately edible when cooked. Starchy, you can pound it and make some sort of floury sort of thing. And perhaps more importantly would be these berries, right? If you guys are familiar with like cereal stages, if the forest fire tears through an area, the first thing to come through are the grasses, and then the second thing to come through are the berry patches, right? So if you're seasonally burning or recurrently burning the environment, you're stimulating these berries to show up in profusion. And they were evidently very prolific in that area. And of course, berries are good to eat, but bears like to eat berries, and elk like to eat berries. So after all this plant food was harvested, all the critters would come down and browse this stuff, and then you can just go out and knock them off. So there's descriptions of huge herds of deer here, huge herds of elk, and people were very protective of those herds because it's really easy to overharvest them. But maintaining these open open meadow patches and berry patches just drew them in like a magnet, right? And they're going to come down off the mountainside and show up right at your front door, and then you can knock them off. This is what the Camas bulb looks like. I should have said that. It's sort of like a little tulip bulb. I've never eaten it. It grows in my yard. I've got a little patch going. One of these years I'll fire up the earth oven and cook it for 2 days and see how it tastes. But that's my last stop. I appreciate your time here. Just 5 things, if I could sort of burn them into you guys' brains and you take it away with you and share it. Number 1, I dwelled on this quite a lot at the start, and I tried to hit it every time I could, again, is living by canoe, right? We can't understand how people used to live in these environments and visit each other and do all the things they need to do if we can't wrap our heads around getting around by canoe every damn day. And this idea, secondly, this idea of Pentlatch, buried belly, right? I started out talking about this too, that the name for this place isn't the land of plenty, but it actually is the land of plenty, right? I've talked about all these resources here, all the fish, all the berries, all the camas. I didn't even talk about shellfish, but this place had everything you wanted in abundance. But it's not just that they're there and their fish are jumping right into your pot. It's this technology and knowledge that goes with it, right? You have to manage this stuff. You have to have the right technology to harvest it, to preserve it, and the know-how to make sure that you're not overdoing it, right? People could have over-harvested all the fish. They could have put a big weir across the river and knocked off all the salmon and driven them to near extinction. But we have no evidence of that. We have no evidence of starvation here. We have got an evidence instead of, a very successful lifeway for thousands of years for thousands of people. So however they did it, with the technology and the know-how, they did it successfully for thousands and thousands of years. Another major concept I dwelled on again too is this idea of spirit questing, going out there and getting gifts from places and people and beings out on that landscape that's giving you a gift that you share with your community, right? You take that sacred power and then you can share that gift with your family, pass it on to those who need it. I've touched twice on these artistic traditions in stone. Archaeologically, we're blind to 99% of what people would have been doing and wearing, right? People have been wearing woven capes and wool garments. We don't find that archaeologically almost ever, right? It just disappears. 2-3 years in the ground, 5 years in the ground, 5,000 years in the ground, it's long gone. But the intricacy we can see in this artwork in the stone, right? If people are doing that, carving that sort of stuff into stone pebbles or onto stone panels, they must have had like fantastic gear and artwork and regalia. I imagine their houses were vividly painted. They probably had really cool tattoos. I think my feeling is folks here really like to dress it up, but we just get a glimpse of that, right? Just from the rock carvings and things that we can see. What I didn't dwell on that much were just the sheer number of village sites here. I think I talked about 3 village sites here in the Comox Valley. By my count, there's at least 30, right? So people got to shift their brain that way a little bit too. It's like, oh, Comox, they're here by the mouth of the river. That's where you've always lived. Yay. Why are you interested in what's going on over at Kai Bay, or why are you interested in what's going on in Denman Island? It's like, well, there are massive villages there too, right? There are thousands of people living on those islands. So people were interested because those are their ancestors. Those are their places. So we need to wrap our head around, and I'm sure this is no news to you guardians, that lots of village sites, lots of people. I'm fully comfortable with a population of like 5,000 to 8,000 people in the Comox Valley. I'd be surprised if it was a lot more, but I'd be really shocked if it was a lot less. So this idea of thousands of people living here for thousands of time because of these features, right? They knew how to get around and harvest all this stuff. And it is Pentlatch, it is this buried belly place where there is all this great food. And if you know how to get it, you can make a really good go of it. Thank you.